So often, apologists for President Obama will say, but Cenk, you don't understand. There's nothing he can do. He's negotiating with Republicans. He has to compromise. Are you against compromise? No, I'm not against compromise. Which knucklehead would believe in a black and white world where you never compromise? Maybe a Republican, right? The question is, what's in the compromise? I mean, sometimes I'm amazed at the shallowness of the conversation in Washington, D.C. when it comes to either politicians or reporters. They're like, I guess the liberals are against compromise. Well, what the hell is in the compromise? All right, let's say you had a compromise with your wife. She says, all right, you know what? I'll let you watch a half an hour of TV on Wednesday, and I will control television the rest of the week. So you don't get to watch football, you don't get to watch anything you like, sports are on. No, you don't watch any of your favorite shows. I watch it, but I'm going to give you a half an hour on Wednesday nights. It's a compromise. Come on, so if you're not in favor of compromise? What's in the compromise? That's the question. Come on, how stupid can you be? Okay, so what should be in the compromise? So look, when it comes to the Bush tax cuts for the rich, off the table. If I'm with President Obama and I'm dealing with the Republicans, now why is it off the table? There are things I'm going to compromise on, but I'm not going to compromise on that. Why? I ran a whole election on it. Besides which, I don't have to do anything. Those tax cuts expire on January 1st of 2013. That's in 6 weeks. So Republicans come in, they say, oh, we're not going to compromise on that. Good, don't. 6 weeks from now, they expire. What are you going to do then? I win, you lose. Oh, but then the middle class tax cut expire too. That's what Obama uses as an excuse all the time. How easy is it, man? All right, on January 2nd, I put together a bill. I have Harry Reid introduce it in the Senate that says I am going to give a tax cut to 98% of Americans. Okay, now Republicans, you going to vote against it? Oh, be my guest. How about it, Hoss? Vote against 98% of the country. Vote against middle class tax cut. Go for it. Be my guest. They're not going to vote against that. And if they do, they're going to get slaughtered in 2014. Okay? So it's the easiest win of all time. It's a layup. Now, that doesn't mean you don't compromise. Here's what's on the table. So how much are we going to increase taxes on capital gains, dividend income, carried interest, estate tax, corporate taxes? Now, of course, Obama's going in the reverse direction. He's going to actually cut corporate taxes. But I would say, but he says, oh, we're going to take away loopholes and deductions. Here's what I'd say. No, you're right, Boehner and all those guys. Yeah, we are going to take away loopholes and deductions. But no, we're not going to cut corporate taxes. We're going to keep the same rate. Oh, but no, you can't. Oh, I can and I will. And on capital gains, look, I think you should go back up to 39.6. You should be charged like for the top bracket, like anything else. Dividends, same thing. Carried interest, what a joke. That's just a loophole for people like Mitt Romney and private equity. No, those are all going back up. Now, does it have to go back up to 39.6? Well, that's where you have an opposing party, and you can negotiate. I wouldn't bring them up to 39.6. I'd bring them up to 50%. Okay, but all right, let's negotiate. Can it be lower? Could it be 25? Could it be 30? Yeah, that's where you have compromise, okay? But no, I'm not going to compromise on the things that have already been resolved. So when it comes to entitlements, well, here's the three things, first of all, that I would play for them. First, they come in the room, everybody sit down, and then I say, look, guys, I just want to make it clear. You all, in fact, before I even play the tape, I say to everybody, hey, you all agree, Republicans, that Ronald Reagan's always right? I mean, whenever I've debated, you guys always say, Ronald Reagan. So is Ronald Reagan an asshole, or is he right? All right, everybody raise your hand if you think Ronald Reagan's an asshole and doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, none of you raised your hand. So you all agree Ronald Reagan's right. All right, well, let me show you Ronald Reagan.
Social Security has nothing to do with the deficit. Social Security is totally funded by the payroll tax levied on employer and employee.
Nothing to do with the deficit. So Ronald Reagan agrees, and I assume you agree, and I certainly agree, that Social Security is off the table, okay? Now, how about Medicare and Medicaid? Now, I remember somebody ran a campaign on cutting Medicare, and in fact, he would say quite often. He was the VP, I believe, candidate on the Republican ticket, but his idea was considered the big idea on the Republican side. Let's see how that turned out.
Optional personal retirement accounts for Social Security, converting Medicare into a defined contribution sort of voucher system.
Yeah, that's what the American people said. No, we're not going to do your dumbass idea of turning Medicare into a voucher overwhelmingly rejected. Hey, you know what happened? We just had an election about it. And the answer was, How about your Medicaid idea? Let's see how that turned out.
What we're trying to do here is couple Medicaid reforms with food stamp reforms, housing assistance reforms, education reforms for job training. We're trying to couple these things by sending them back to the states in block grants.
So we just had an election about whether we're going to turn Medicare into a voucher and Medicaid into block grants. And the American people said no. So that is now off the table because the American people have spoken. Now I can compromise on other spending cuts, and God, it would hurt to cut the pensions of federal employees, et cetera, et cetera. I think it's a bad idea for the economy, but I don't just get to make the decisions. I know that there's got to be some degree of compromise. But when it comes to the ratios, President Obama keeps bragging about, I want to do 3 times as many spending cuts, $3 of spending cuts for every dollar of tax increases. So that's his formula, right? But that was before the election. Here would be my formula after the election. $1 in spending cuts for $3 in tax increases. That's the new formula. You know why? Because we just had an election. And that's what the American people voted for. You don't like it? Well, you know what might have helped is if you won the election. Now, would I stick with just 1 to 3? Since I'm not actually in these negotiations, I can tell you that that would be my starting point so that you can finally have what President Obama claims he wants, a balanced approach. You give me $2 in tax increases, I'll give you $2 in spending cuts. Then we can have a real conversation, okay? But what President Obama is offering is not a real conversation. He is giving them 3 times as many things as we're getting in return. That $1 trillion in tax increases would happen if we did absolutely nothing in 6 weeks. That's not a compromise. That's giving them everything they want, even after you won the election. And then throwing in the cuts to Medicare and Medicaid on top for icing on the cake, and then throwing in corporate tax cuts, and then saying, hey, you know what? Maybe we won't even stick to our guns on raising taxes on people making over $250,000. That ain't compromise. That's a capitulation. And that's not because President Obama's weak. He just ran an incredibly strong campaign when it was his ass on the line. No, it's because President Obama wants the same result as Republicans. As we showed you yesterday, his top advisor on Wall Street said their interests are aligned. In fact, let me go to Lee Brody from CNBC. He wrote an article and said, a plan presented by Romney and embraced by the GOP to cap deductions appears to be gaining traction despite Romney's loss. So here we go again. It doesn't matter who wins. They already had a plan. The oligarchy had a plan, and they were going to do that plan no matter what. Larry Kudlow is quoted in that article, and he says, without any shame or conscience, I really hope Obama buys into Mitt's plan. Well, I guess you do hope that, don't you? Now, Larry Kudlow, of course, is right-winger, representative of the rich on CNBC. But you're saying, okay, these are just guys wishful thinking on CNBC. Well, then let's go to Kent Conrad. Now, he's not just a Democrat. He's the chairman of the Budget Committee on the Senate side. Quote, about the Mitt Romney plan, let's just say there's a renewed interest. And that's how this game is played. They pretend to be progressive during the elections, but once that's over, you're going to get the Mitt Romney plan anyway. It makes me physically ill. Now, my job is to let you know what's happening before it happens. As I tell you every time, you'll get to see whether I'm right or wrong. And I'm not making this stuff up. You think I told Kent Conrad to say, hey, he's reconsidering the Mitt Romney plan? No, he said it. You think I told Jay Carney, think about, hey, adjusting the rates on $250,000 and bring him up? No, he said it. He said we're open to it. Did I put these words in Obama's mouth? No. My job is to interpret what they're saying. If you think that they're not going to screw you, good luck to you. But you're wrong.